Control is a form of doubting God. Every time your hands cling desperately to an outcome, every time your mind works overtime trying to force things to happen exactly as you planned, every time your heart races because you feel that if you don't intervene, everything will collapse, you are making a silent but devastating statement. You are saying, God, I don't trust that you know what you're doing. You are saying, your plan is insufficient. My limited vision is superior to your infinite wisdom. You are saying, if I don't control this myself, it will go wrong because apparently you need my help to run the universe. And in that silent declaration, in that compulsive need to control, lies the root of all your anxiety. Because trying to control what you cannot control is like trying to stop the ocean with your hands. You can strain, you can exhaust yourself, you can devote every hour of every day to that impossible effort. But the ocean will keep moving according to its own laws, and you will have wasted your life fighting a battle you could never win. The Stoics understood something that modern culture, with its mantra of "you can do anything if you try hard enough," refuses to accept. There are things under your control, and there are things completely outside your control. And wisdom, peace, true freedom come from knowing exactly the difference between the two. Marcus Aurelius, emperor of the most powerful empire in the world, a man who had more external control than almost any human being in history, wrote something that should completely change how you live. You have power over your mind, not over external events. Realize this, and you will find strength. He did not say, try harder to control external events. He did not say, if you work hard enough, you can control everything. He said the opposite. He said that your real power, your genuine strength, comes from recognizing that external events are not under your control, and that trying to control them is exactly what weakens you. Because every hour you spend trying to control the uncontrollable is an hour you did not invest in the only thing you truly can control: your inner response, your character, your perspective, your faith. Seneca, who lived at the height of Roman power, expressed it even more directly. The wise person accepts everything that happens as if he himself had chosen it, not because he controls events, but because he trusts that every event serves a purpose his limited mind cannot fully understand. That trust, that deep faith that a greater order is at work, is exactly what is missing from your life. Not because you don't believe in God intellectually, but because you don't trust Him practically. You say you believe, but you live as if everything depends on you. You say you trust, but you control as if God needs your constant supervision. You say you have faith, but anxiety consumes you as if you were completely alone in this. And that contradiction between what you say you believe and how you actually live is what is destroying you from the inside. Epictetus, who survived slavery and became one of the most influential philosophers in history, taught something radical. It is not things themselves that disturb us, but our opinions about things, and specifically our opinion that we should control what we cannot control. Is revelise. That disturbance, that constant anxiety, does not come from your circumstances. It comes from your resistance to your circumstances, from your constant fight against what already is, from your refusal to let go of control and trust that something greater than you is directing this. What follows are 10 Stoic lessons on letting go of control and trusting God. They are not abstract theological reflections. They are practical truths that will completely change how you experience your life. Each one directly confronts your need for control. Each one reveals how that need is creating the very anxiety you are trying to avoid. And each one shows you the path back to peace, the peace that only comes when you finally let go and trust. But before continuing, you need to do more than just listen. You need to declare your willingness to let go. Because these lessons will not help you if you hear them with your hands still clenched around control. Go to the comments right now and write exactly this. I release control. I trust God's plan. Those words are not an empty affirmation. They are your declaration that you are willing to stop fighting, that you are willing to stop acting as if everything depends on you, that you are willing to trust that a greater wisdom is at work, even if your limited mind cannot fully understand it. Do it now. Pause. Go to the comments. Write, I release control. I trust God's plan. The Stoics understood the power of external declaration. When you name something publicly, when you make it visible, you create a force that multiplies your ability to live it, because it is no longer a private thought you can abandon when it becomes inconvenient. It is a public commitment you have made, and that commitment creates the accountability that turns intention into real practice. This is not the moment for timidity. It is not the moment for maybe or I'll think about it. This is the moment to decide definitively whether you will continue living in the anxiety of constant control, or whether you will finally let go and trust that God knows exactly what He is doing, even when you do not understand it. Prepare yourself, because what comes next will not comfort you with pleasant lies. It will confront you with truths you have probably been avoiding for years. And that confrontation is exactly what you need in order to finally release the control that is destroying you. First Stoic lesson. Wanting to control everything means not believing that God has a better plan than yours. There is a subtle arrogance hidden in your need to control. Not the obvious arrogance of someone who openly says, I'm better than everyone else, but the quiet arrogance of someone who lives as if their limited plan were superior to God's infinite plan. Every time you try to force a specific outcome, you are making an implicit declaration. God, your plan is insufficient. I know better what I need, and if I don't step in to control this, it will go wrong. That declaration is so common that you no longer recognize it for what it truly is: deep doubt disguised as responsibility. Marcus Aurelius, who had more external power and control than almost any human being in history, wrote something that completely dismantles this need. Everything happens according to the divine order of the universe. What happens is what was meant to happen. And to resist what was meant to happen is to resist the very order of existence itself. This was not the passive reflection of someone who had given up on life. It was the active understanding of someone who grasped something profound. The universe is not random chaos. There is order. There is a plan. There is infinite intelligence at work. And your limited plan, no matter how well-intentioned, is infinitesimally small compared to that greater design. So when you try to control everything, when you resist what is happening because it does not match your plan, you are essentially saying, my vision of how things should be is wiser than the vision of the one who designed the entire universe. When stated that clearly, the arrogance becomes obvious. But you don't state it that way. You disguise it. You call it being responsible. You call it taking control of my life. You call it not giving up. And under those acceptable labels hides the same arrogance. The belief that you know better than God what you need. Epictetus taught something very specific about this. Do not demand that events happen as you wish. Wish that events happen as they do happen, and you will live in peace. That instruction sounds like resignation, but it is exactly the opposite. It is freedom from the impossible burden of controlling what cannot be controlled. Because when you stop demanding that everything unfold according to your plan, when you accept that a greater plan is at work, you are released. You no longer live in constant anxiety about things going wrong, according to your limited definition of what is right. You live in trust that things are unfolding exactly as they must, according to a plan your mind cannot fully comprehend. And that trust is the opposite of anxiety. The practice that reveals how much you are doubting God's plan is uncomfortable. List the 3 areas of your life where you most try to control outcomes. Now ask yourself honestly for each one. Why do I need to control this? What do I believe will happen if I let go? And if the honest answer is, I think it will go wrong, recognize what you are really saying. I don't believe God can handle this without my intervention. I don't trust that His plan is good enough. That lack of trust, that deep doubt, is the true root of your need for control. And as long as you hold on to it, as long as you believe you must supervise every detail because God needs your help, you will live in perpetual anxiety. Because total control is impossible. No matter how hard you try, there will always be things beyond your control. And each of those things will become a source of anxiety as long as you believe it is your responsibility to manage them. Seneca observed this in people who destroyed themselves trying to control the uncontrollable. They suffer more in imagination than in reality. They spend all their energy trying to prevent things that often never happen, and in that effort, they lose the life they are actually living. That is exactly your pattern. You spend more energy worrying about controlling the future than living the present. You spend more time planning how to force outcomes than accepting what is already happening. And in that constant effort, you completely lose the peace that comes from trusting that everything is unfolding exactly as it should. Marcus Aurelius also understood that letting go of control is not passivity. Do everything within your power over what is under your control, but recognize that the final outcome is not under your control, and accept that outcome as perfect, because it is what the divine order decided. That distinction is critical. It is not about giving up or refusing to act. It is about acting fully where you have control and fully releasing what you do not. You give your best effort. You give everything you have. And then you trust that the outcome, whatever it is exactly the right one according to a plan you do not need to fully understand. That combination of maximum effort and complete detachment from the outcome is the exact formula for peace. Not the passive peace of someone who has quit, but the active peace of someone who trusts while acting. Epictetus closed this teaching with a devastating question. Do you believe God needs your advice on how to manage your life? Or do you believe that the one who designed the entire universe can handle your circumstances without your constant supervision? That question exposes the arrogance hidden in your need for control. No, God does not need your advice. No, God does not need your supervision. No, God does not require your constant intervention for things to turn out well. Things are already turning out well according to His definition, even when they do not match yours. And as long as you keep preferring your limited definition over His infinite wisdom, You will keep living in the anxiety of trying to control what was never yours to control. Seneca spoke the final truth about this. The wise person does not try to control the wind, he adjusts his sails, because he knows the wind will blow according to its own laws, and fighting those laws is a waste of energy that could be used to navigate wisely. Stop trying to control the wind of your circumstances. Stop demanding that everything unfold according to your limited plan. Stop living as if God needs your help to govern your life. And begin trusting that the plan already at work is infinitely better than any plan your limited mind could ever design. Because wanting to control everything is not believing that God has a better plan than yours. And that lack of faith is exactly what keeps you trapped in constant anxiety, trying to do a job that was never yours to do. Second Stoic lesson. Your anxiety does not come from what happens, it comes from resisting God's will. There is a lie you keep telling yourself about your anxiety. I'm anxious because of what's happening. I'm anxious about what might happen. I'm anxious because the circumstances are difficult. All of these explanations place the source of your anxiety outside of you, in events, in circumstances, in things beyond your control. But Epictetus destroyed that lie 2,000 years ago. People are not disturbed by things themselves, but by the opinions they hold about those things. Your anxiety does not come from what is happening. It comes from how you are thinking about what is happening. More specifically, it comes from one particular opinion, the belief that what is happening should not be happening. That resistance to reality, this inner rejection of what already is the true source of all your anxiety. Because when you resist what is happening, when you internally fight against present reality, you create an unbearable tension. Reality is what it is. It does not change because you reject it, but you suffer immensely in that rejection, in that internal battle against what you cannot change. And as long as you keep fighting, as long as you keep resisting, the anxiety remains. Not because the circumstances are inherently anxiety-producing, but because your resistance to them creates the anxiety. Marcus Aurelius understood this deeply. If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your judgment about it. And you have the power to revoke that judgment at any moment. That ability to revoke your judgment, to change how you think about what is happening, is the very power you are not using, because you are so convinced that your anxiety is justified by the circumstances that you never even question it. You simply assume, of course I'm anxious. Look at what's happening. But what's happening is neutral. It is your resistance to it that creates the suffering. Two people can face the exact same circumstances. One lives in constant anxiety. The other lives in peace. The difference is not the circumstances. It is the relationship to the circumstances. One resists, fights, demands that reality be different. The other accepts not with passive resignation, but with active trust that what is happening is exactly what must happen. And that difference in relationship creates completely different inner experiences. Seneca observed this constantly. Suffering arises when we want reality to be different from what it is. Peace arises when we accept reality exactly as it is, trusting that it serves a greater purpose. That acceptance does not mean you like what is happening. It does not mean you stop acting to change what you can change. It means you stop fighting internally against what already is. You stop wasting energy on useless resistance. And you use all your energy to respond wisely from acceptance instead of reacting anxiously from resistance. The practice that reveals how much you are resisting is simple. Identify your greatest current source of anxiety, the situation that keeps you awake at night. Now, complete this sentence honestly. I am anxious because I believe that should not be happening. When you fill in that blank, when you clearly identify what you believe should not be happening, recognize what you are really saying. God, your will is wrong. This situation you allowed should not exist, and until you change it according to my preference, I will remain anxious. That is the arrogance hidden inside your anxiety. It is not an appropriate response to difficult circumstances. It is a declaration that you know better than God how things should be. And as long as you hold that declaration, so long as you believe you have the authority to judge God's will as mistaken, the anxiety will remain. Because you are fighting a battle, you cannot win. Reality already is what it is. Your resistance does not change it. It only exhausts you. It only consumes you. It only keeps you trapped in constant suffering. Epictetus taught his students something radical about this. When something disturbs you, say immediately. That ability to choose a different opinion is the power you have forgotten you possess. Because you have lived so long believing that your anxiety is caused by circumstances that you never even consider that it might be caused by your resistance to them. But the moment you recognize that your anxiety comes from resistance, not from the events themselves, you regain your power. You cannot control events, but you can control your relationship to them. You cannot change what already happened, but you can change how you think about what happened. You cannot prevent difficult things from occurring, but you can stop resisting when they do. And in letting go of resistance, in deeply accepting that what is happening is exactly what God's will has allowed, you find peace. Not because the circumstances changed, but because your relationship to them transformed. Marcus Aurelius practiced this every morning. When you wake in the morning, remind yourself, I rise to do the work of a human being, and part of that work is accepting whatever the day brings without resistance. That mental preparation to accept without resistance is exactly what allowed him to govern an empire in constant crisis without living in constant anxiety. Not because the crises were not real, but because he did not resist them. He accepted them as part of the divine order, as exactly what he was meant to face, as opportunities sent by Providence to forge his character. And from that acceptance, he responded wisely, instead of reacting anxiously. Seneca summarized this with devastating clarity. Nothing happens to the wise person that he considers unexpected, because he lives constantly prepared for the divine will to manifest in ways his limited mind did not anticipate. That constant readiness to accept the unexpected is exactly what you need to cultivate, not because the unexpected will stop happening, but because you will stop resisting when it does. And in releasing that resistance, in deeply accepting that everything that happens is part of God's will, your anxiety dissolves. Not gradually, immediately, because anxiety cannot survive without resistance. It is a direct product of fighting what already is. And when you stop fighting, when you finally accept, anxiety has nothing to cling to. Epictetus closed this teaching with a final instruction. Say to every event, you came according to God's will. You are exactly what was meant to come, and I accept you completely, without resistance. That complete acceptance is not weakness. It is the deepest form of strength. because it requires letting go of control. It requires trusting something greater than yourself. It requires real faith, not just declared faith. And when you finally practice it, when you stop resisting and start accepting, you discover something liberating. Most of your suffering was never coming from the circumstances. It was coming from your resistance to them. And the moment you release that resistance, the moment you accept that what is happening is exactly God's will manifesting, the anxiety leaves. Not because the circumstances changed, but because your relationship to them changed completely. Your anxiety does not come from what happens. It comes from resisting the will of God. And as long as you keep resisting, so long as you keep fighting, what already is anxiety will remain. But the moment you let go, the moment you accept, the moment you trust, peace arrives. Not as a reward, but as the natural consequence of stopping your fight against the divine order of the universe. Third Stoic lesson: God does not need you to explain how to do his job. There is a kind of prayer that reveals exactly how much you doubt God. It is not the prayer that asks for strength. It is not the one that seeks wisdom. It is not the one that expresses gratitude. It is the prayer that tells God exactly how he should fix your problem. God, I need this situation to be resolved this way. God, make this person change in this specific manner. God, fix these circumstances exactly according to my plan. Every one of those prayers has something in common. They act as if God needs your instructions, as if infinite wisdom requires your limited guidance to know what to do with your life. The Stoics did not pray that way. Marcus Aurelius wrote something that completely transforms how you should pray. Do not pray for specific outcomes. Pray for the wisdom to accept whatever comes. Because what comes is exactly what Providence has decided you need. Lacquer. That difference between asking for specific outcomes and asking for acceptance is the difference between doubting God and trusting God. When you ask God for specific outcomes, you are operating from the belief that you know better than he does what you need. You assume that your limited vision of how things should unfold is wiser than his infinite vision. You treat God as if he were an employee who must follow your instructions, instead of recognizing him as the architect who designed the entire system. And hidden inside that way of praying is an arrogance you probably do not even recognize. Epictetus taught something radical about this. The wise person does not tell God what should happen. He asks God to teach him how to accept whatever happens, because he trusts that whatever happens will be exactly right. That deep trust, that willingness to release control even in prayer, is exactly what is missing from your spiritual life. Because your prayer is not an act of faith, it is an act of negotiation. You try to negotiate with God. If you do this for me, I will do this for you. You try to instruct God. This is the correct solution to my problem. Please implement my plan. You try to supervise God. Why haven't you fixed this the way I asked? Do you need a reminder of how this is supposed to work? And all of these ways of praying reveal the same thing. You do not truly trust that God knows what he is doing. You trust yourself more than him, and you ask him to validate your plan instead of trusting his. Seneca observed this in people who prayed constantly but lived in perpetual anxiety. They pray without ceasing for specific outcomes and live in constant anxiety when those outcomes do not arrive as requested, because their peace depended on God following their instructions, not on trusting God's wisdom. That is exactly your situation. You have conditioned your peace on God doing exactly what you asked. And when he does not, When things unfold differently than you planned, you feel abandoned, not because God abandoned you, but because he did not follow your plan, and you confused not following my plan with not caring for me. But God does not need to follow your plan in order to care for you. In fact, the deepest care often comes in forms your limited mind would never have asked for. The practice that reveals how much you are trying to control God is uncomfortable. Review your recent prayers. What percentage of them are specific instructions about how God should solve your problems? How many are, God, make this happen exactly this way? How many are, God, teach me to accept whatever you decide must happen? And if most of them are the first type, recognize what you are really doing. You are not trusting. You are trying to control through prayer. You are using prayer not as an act of surrender, but as a method of negotiation. And as long as you pray this way, as long as you try to tell God how to do his job, your anxiety will remain. Because your peace is conditioned on him following your instructions. And he does not need to follow your instructions. Marcus Aurelius practiced a completely different kind of prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept what I cannot change, the courage to change what I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Notice what is missing from that prayer. No specific instructions about how God should fix anything. Only requests for inner qualities, serenity, courage, wisdom, because those qualities are within your control to cultivate, and they are exactly what you need to navigate any circumstance God allows. Instead of asking for specific circumstances, which are not under your control and are often not what you truly need, even if you believe they are, Epictetus also taught his students to pray in a radically different way. Do not pray for difficult things to be removed. Pray for the strength to endure them. Because difficult things are exactly the training God decided you need. That shift from God remove this to God strengthen me for this completely changes your relationship with hardship. Difficulties are no longer enemies God must eliminate according to your instructions. They become opportunities God allowed specifically for your growth, to forge in you the qualities you will need. And when you pray for strength instead of removal, you are trusting that God knows exactly what training you need, even if it is painful, even if it is not what you would have chosen, even if your plan would have been completely different. Seneca summarized this with a clarity that should transform how you pray. The wise person does not ask God to change circumstances. He asks God to change him so that circumstances transform him instead of destroying him. That is the complete difference between doubting God and trusting God. Doubting God says, "These circumstances are wrong. Change them according to my plan." Trusting God says, "These circumstances are exactly right. Change me so I can grow through them." It had not ever. The first places responsibility on God to follow your plan. The second places responsibility on you to accept his. And only the second produces peace. Because only the second truly releases control. Marcus Aurelius also recognized that trying to instruct God reveals exactly where your faith is lacking. When you tell God how your life should work, you act from the belief that he does not know what he is doing without your guidance, and that belief is the very root of your anxiety. That connection between instructing God and living in anxiety is direct. If your peace depends on God following your instructions, and he is not obligated to follow your instructions, you will live in perpetual anxiety. But if your peace depends on trusting that whatever he decides will be right, then you are at peace no matter what happens. Because your peace is not conditioned on specific outcomes. It is grounded in unconditional trust. Epictetus closed this lesson with a devastating question. If God needed your advice to know what to do with your life, what kind of God would he be? And if he does not need your advice, why do you keep giving it as if he did? That question exposes the full contradiction in how you pray. You say you believe in an all-knowing God, but you pray as if he needs you to explain how things work. You say you trust his wisdom, but you give him detailed instructions as if his wisdom were insufficient without your guidance. You say you have faith, but you condition your peace on him doing exactly what you asked. And all of these contradictions reveal the same thing. You do not truly trust. You only say that you do. Seneca spoke the final truth about this. The prayer of the wise is simple. God, let your will be done. Not God, make my will be done. Because the wise trust that God's will is infinitely superior to their own. Stop trying to tell God how to do his job. Stop praying as if he needs your instructions to know what to do with your life. Stop conditioning your peace on him, following your plan. And start praying like someone who truly trusts. God, not my will, but yours. Not my plan, but yours. Not my wisdom, but yours. Because God does not need you to explain how to do his job. And as long as you keep trying, as long as you keep praying with instructions, instead of surrender, your anxiety will remain, because your peace will be tied to something you cannot control, God following your instructions. But when you finally pray with genuine surrender, when you release control even in your prayer life, you find the peace you were seeking, not because God changed, but because you finally trusted that he knows exactly what he is doing without needing your supervision. Fourth Stoic lesson. Letting go of control is the most difficult and the most powerful act of faith. There is a reason letting go of control is so hard. It is not because you are weak. It is not because you are naturally anxious. It is not because you lack faith. It is because letting go of control requires the most terrifying kind of faith. The faith to trust something you cannot see working. The faith to believe in a plan you do not fully understand. The faith to surrender to a will that often seems opposed to your own. This is not the easy faith of saying, I believe in God when life is comfortable. This is the hard faith of saying, I trust God in the middle of chaos. Seneca wrote something that perfectly captures why this is so challenging. The wise person accepts everything that happens as if he himself had chosen it. Not because he controls what happens, but because he trusts providence so completely that he receives its will as if it were his own. Read that again. As if he himself had chosen it. That does not mean he enjoys everything that happens. It means he trusts so deeply that it is right, that he accepts it with the same peace he would have if he had designed it himself. That is a level of faith far beyond the one you are practicing now. You say you have faith, but your faith is conditional. You have faith when things go well, when your plans work, when outcomes align with your expectations. But when things fall apart, when your plans fail, when reality contradicts what you wanted, your faith collapses into anxiety. And that collapse reveals the truth. It was not real faith. It was trust conditioned on God doing what you wanted. Real faith is trusting even when you do not understand, especially when you do not understand. Real faith is accepting even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. Real faith is letting go of control even when it terrifies you, especially when it terrifies you. Marcus Aurelius practiced this precisely in his most difficult moments. When everything seems to be going wrong, when my plans fail, when circumstances oppose my desires, I stop and ask myself, what if this is exactly right? What if Providence knows something I do not? That single question completely transforms how you experience hardship. It shifts you from "this is wrong and must be fixed" to "this is exactly right, even if I do not yet understand why." And from that second perspective, rooted in deep trust, you can let go of control. Not because you gave up, but because you trust that something greater than you is guiding this where it needs to go. The practice that reveals whether you have real faith or only conditional faith is uncomfortable. Think of the situation in your life that most terrifies you to release. The relationship you are gripping desperately. The outcome you are trying to force. The circumstance you are obsessively controlling. Now complete this sentence honestly. I cannot let this go because I believe that if I do. When you finish that sentence, recognize what you are really saying. I do not trust that God can handle this without my control. I believe my control is necessary for things to turn out well. That belief that your control is necessary is exactly what prevents you from letting go. And as long as you hold it, you will never experience the peace that comes from real trust. Epictetus taught something precise about this. True faith is not believing that God will give you what you want. It is trusting that what God gives you is exactly what you need, even when it is the opposite of what you wanted. That distinction is crucial. Most people confuse getting what I want with God loves me. So when they do not receive what they want, they conclude, God does not love me, or God has abandoned me. But that is not a problem of divine love. It is a problem of limited understanding. Because God is giving you exactly what you need, and what you need is often not what you want. A loving parent does not give a child everything the child asks for. He gives the child what the child needs to grow. And what a child needs to grow often includes difficulty, disappointment, and failure that build character. The child may interpret that as, my father does not love me because he did not give me what I wanted. But the father knows that love means giving what is needed, not what is desired. God works in exactly the same way. Seneca also understood why letting go feels so terrifying. We fear releasing control because we believe control is what keeps us safe. But control is impossible. And chasing the impossible is precisely what traps us in perpetual anxiety. This paradox is devastating. You seek control to feel safe, but because total control is impossible, that pursuit creates the very insecurity you are trying to escape. Letting go of control, by contrast, initially feels like danger, but eventually it produces the only real safety there is, the peace of trusting something greater than yourself. Marcus Aurelius also trained himself to let go deliberately in small areas so he could let go in larger ones. I practice releasing control in small decisions every day. I accept what others choose. I accept outcomes without intervening. So I am trained to let go when the stakes are higher. This gradual training is exactly what you need. You cannot jump straight from I control everything to I fully trust God with the most important things. You must train the muscle of surrender in small ways first. Let others choose where to eat without controlling it. Accept how a project unfolds without micromanaging every detail. Trust that things will function without your constant supervision in small matters. As you practice releasing the small, you develop the capacity to release the large. Epictetus closed this lesson with a liberating truth. Letting go of control does not make you weak. It makes you wise, because it recognizes what was never yours to control and stops wasting energy on the impossible. That wisdom, the recognition that total control was never available to you, is what sets you free. As long as you chase the impossible, you will live in constant frustration. But when you release the impossible and trust what is possible, trusting God, you find the peace you were searching for in the wrong place. Seneca summarized it with final clarity. The most powerful act of faith is not believing that God will do what you want. It is trusting that what He does is exactly right, even when it completely contradicts what you wanted. That is the faith you must cultivate. Not the easy faith of trusting when everything goes according to your plan, but the difficult faith of trusting when nothing goes according to your plan and still believing it is unfolding according to God's. Because letting go of control is the most difficult act of faith, but it is also the most powerful. For in that surrender, you find the peace that control never gave you. The peace of trusting that someone infinitely wiser than you is guiding this exactly where it needs to go, and that your job is not to control the journey. It is to trust the one who is driving. Fifth Stoic lesson. You do not control when blessings arrive, only whether you recognize them when they do. A silent tragedy is happening in your life every single day. God is sending you answers. He is opening doors. He is placing opportunities in your path. But you don't see them, not because they aren't there, but because they are arriving differently than you expected, in a different package, at a different time, through a different person. And because they don't match the specific image you had in your mind of how an answer should look, you overlook them entirely. Then you complain that God isn't responding. Marcus Aurelius wrote something about this that should completely change how you interpret your life. Practice gratitude even for adversity. For when you trust that everything serves a greater purpose, even what appears bad is often the blessing you failed to recognize when it arrived. Gratitude for adversity is not toxic optimism. It is a deep acknowledgement that your ability to judge what is good or bad is extremely limited. What you call failure today may be the redirection that saves you tomorrow. What you call loss today may be the space you needed to receive something better tomorrow. What you call rejection today may be the protection that spared you a disaster you could not see coming. But you will only recognize these things as blessings if you trust that God knows what He is doing. If you don't trust, if you judge everything through your limited understanding, you will live surrounded by blessings that you call curses. Epictetus taught something precise about this kind of recognition. God sends you exactly what you need at the exact moment you need it, but often not in the form you expected. And your failure to recognize it does not mean it didn't arrive. It only means you didn't see it. That blindness, your inability to recognize blessings when they don't arrive according to your expectations, is exactly why you feel ignored by God. Not because He is ignoring you, but because you are so focused on how you wanted Him to respond that you miss how He actually is responding. The practice that reveals how many blessings you have ignored is illuminating. Think of something you considered a disaster 1 year ago, something that went wrong according to your plan. Now look at it from where you stand today. What opportunities did that disaster open? What did you learn? What grew inside you because of it? If you are honest, you will often discover that what you called a disaster was exactly the redirection you needed. even though you didn't want it at the time. It was God answering, just not with a yes to what you asked for, but with an, I have something better in mind that you could not yet see. Seneca observed this constantly in people who rejected blessings because they arrived disguised. They pray for opportunities, but when opportunities arrive as difficult challenges, they reject them. Because they wanted comfortable opportunities, not the ones that would actually make them grow. That is exactly your situation. You ask for growth but reject the challenges that create growth because they are uncomfortable. You ask for strength but reject the hardships that forge strength because they are painful. You ask for wisdom but reject the experiences that teach wisdom because they require admitting you don't know. And in rejecting blessings disguised as difficulty, you lose exactly what you asked for. Not because God did not respond, but because when he responded in an unexpected way, you did not recognize it. Marcus Aurelius practiced actively searching for the hidden blessing in every hardship. When something bad happens, I immediately ask, what blessing is hidden here? What is Providence trying to teach me? How is this preparing me for what is coming? Those questions completely transform how you experience difficulty. Hardships stop being interruptions to the plan and become essential parts of the plan. They stop being obstacles blocking the path and become the path itself. From that perspective, every difficulty is a blessing waiting to be recognized. Epictetus also warned specifically against demanding that blessings arrive on your schedule. You do not control when answers arrive. You only control whether your eyes are open to see them when they do. And they often arrive earlier or later than expected, but always at the exact right moment, according to Providence. Surrendering your timeline is essential, because one of the main ways you fail to recognize blessings is by labeling them too early or too late according to your limited calendar. But God does not operate on your calendar. He operates on the perfect timing of Providence. What looks like delay to you is often perfect timing, timing you cannot see because you only see your portion of the story. Seneca summarized this with a perfect analogy. The farmer does not control when the harvest grows. He only controls whether he plants the seeds and whether he is present to harvest when the time comes. God works the same way. You plant through your actions. He decides the timing of the harvest. That is your responsibility versus God's responsibility. You plant. You act. You do your part. God decides when it grows, when it matures, when it is ready to be harvested. Your job is not to control the timing. Your job is to be present and attentive when the time arrives. Marcus Aurelius closed this lesson with practical instruction. Live each day actively seeking the blessings that are already present, even in hardship. Especially in hardship. For that is where the greatest blessings are often hidden. That active seeking is exactly what you must practice. Stop waiting for blessings to arrive with a clear label that says, I am a blessing. Start searching for the blessing hidden within each situation, especially those that initially appear negative, because God is answering you constantly. Just not always in the form you expected, not always at the moment you planned, not always in a way you immediately recognize. But if you trust that He knows what He is doing, if you search actively instead of waiting passively, you will discover something liberating. You are surrounded by blessings you once called curses. You are living answers you once interpreted as silence. You are receiving exactly what you need, even if it is not exactly what you wanted. And in that recognition, in learning to see blessings when they arrive in unexpected forms, you find the gratitude that transforms your entire experience of life. You do not control when blessings arrive. You only control whether you recognize them when they do. And if your eyes are closed because you are only looking for what you expected, you will miss exactly what God is giving you. Sixth Stoic lesson. Your plans failed because God's plans for you are better. There is something you need to hear about all those plans you made that didn't work. Those dreams that looked perfect and then collapsed. Those goals you chased with everything you had and never saw materialize. Those relationships you were sure were the one and then ended. Those jobs that seemed ideal and then slipped away. They did not fail because you are incapable. They did not fall apart because you didn't try hard enough. They did not end because you didn't deserve them to work. They failed because God has better plans for you, and those better plans required your smaller plans to fall apart. Epictetus lived this in the most brutal way imaginable. He was born a slave. He lost everything before he ever had anything. He had no freedom, no rights, no control over his own life. By any human standard, his life was a complete disaster, a failed plan from the moment he was born. And yet, from that total failure, from that complete loss of control, emerged one of the most influential philosophers in history. He taught emperors, he shaped generations. His words still echo 2,000 years later. None of that would have happened if his plans had worked, because he didn't have plans. His plans were taken from him, and in the empty space where his plans would have been, God built something infinitely greater. He wrote something specific about this experience. What you call failure, Providence calls redirection. And resisting that change of course is wasting the opportunity to arrive where you truly belong. That perspective completely transforms how you interpret failed plans. It stops being, "This went wrong," and becomes, "This is redirecting me towards something better that I cannot yet see." It stops being evidence that God abandoned you and becomes evidence that God is guiding you towards something your limited vision would never have planned. But you can only see this if you trust. If you don't trust, if you judge every failed plan as proof of divine abandonment, you will live bitter over the very redirections that are saving you. Marcus Aurelius constantly faced plans that didn't work. He planned peace and faced war. He planned prosperity and faced plague. He planned loyalty and faced betrayal. And with every failed plan, he practiced seeing the hand of Providence redirecting him where he needed to be. My plans fail constantly. But I have learned that when my plans fail, I usually discover that something better was waiting in the direction I did not want to go. That willingness to see the something better in the unwanted direction is exactly the faith you must cultivate. Because your plans are based on limited information, you see only a tiny fraction of the full picture. God sees the entire picture, the complete past, the complete present, the complete future. He sees how everything connects. And from that complete vision, He guides you where you need to be, even when that direction completely contradicts your plans. The practice that reveals how much you are resisting God's redirection is profound. Identify the biggest plan you had that failed, the dream that looked perfect but never came true. Now ask yourself honestly, what would I have lost if that plan had worked? What experiences would I never have had? What lessons would I have missed? What greater opportunities would never have appeared? If you are brutally honest, you will often discover something unsettling. That perfect plan you wanted would have led you somewhere far smaller than where God's redirection is taking you, not because your plan was bad, but because it was based on what you knew then, and God knows what you do not yet know. Seneca observed this in people who clung bitterly to failed plans. They cling to what might have been while ignoring what is arriving, and in clinging to a dead past, they lose the living future that Providence is building. That is exactly your situation when you cling to failed plans. You are not being faithful to your dream. You are being blind to redirection. You are so focused on what you wanted that you cannot see what God is preparing. And in that fixation on a dead past, you lose the living present where God is actively at work. Epictetus also taught something precise about letting go of failed plans. When a plan fails, say this immediately: "This was not the right plan. Providence is showing me there is a better path. And even if I cannot see it yet, I trust that I am being guided where I need to be." That immediate declaration of trust is what prevents bitterness. Because bitterness is born when you interpret a failed plan as abandonment, as proof that God does not love you or care for you. But when you interpret it as redirection, as evidence that God is guiding you towards something better, bitterness cannot take root, because you trust that what is coming is better than what you lost, even if you cannot yet see it. Marcus Aurelius practiced something specific when his plans failed. "When a plan fails, I pause and give thanks, not because I enjoy failure, but because I trust it failed for a reason that serves my greater good. And that gratitude prevents bitterness from infecting my perspective." Gratitude for a failed plan sounds absurd, but it is profoundly powerful, because when you give thanks for what you do not understand, you are declaring trust in a greater purpose at work. You are saying, "I do not see how this is good, but I trust that it is. And I give thanks even for what I cannot understand, because I trust the one who designed it." That declaration of trust completely transforms your experience of failure. Seneca also warned about the trap of clinging to one specific plan as if it were the only path. The one who insists there is only one correct path to his destination condemns himself to perpetual frustration. For Providence often leads us by paths we would never have chosen, and resisting those paths is resisting arrival. That resistance to the unchosen path is exactly why you suffer when your plans fail, because you have decided there is only one right way to get where you want to go. And when that way collapses, you conclude the destination is impossible. But what actually happened is that the way you chose was not the right one, and God is showing you a different way. A way you would not have chosen. A way you do not understand, a way that is probably harder or longer, but a way that is right according to infinite wisdom. Epictetus closed this lesson with a liberating truth. Your plans failed, but you did not fail, because your success never depended on your plans working. It depended on trusting God's plans, even when they completely contradicted your own. That redefinition of success is essential. Success is not your plans working. Success is trusting God when they don't. Success is not arriving exactly where you planned. Success is allowing God to take you exactly where you need to be. Success is not maintaining control. Success is releasing control and discovering you were in better hands all along. Marcus Aurelius summarized this with final clarity. "My plans fail constantly, and I have learned to be grateful for it. For every failed plan is evidence that God is involved enough in my life to redirect me when I am going the wrong way. That perspective transforms failure from evidence of abandonment into evidence of active care. Because if God did not care for you, He would let you pursue mediocre plans without intervention. But because He does care, He intervenes. He dismantles what is not right for you. He closes doors that looked perfect but would have led you somewhere smaller. And He opens doors you never even knew existed toward places your limited mind could never have imagined. Your plans failed, not as punishment, but as protection, as redirection, as proof that God has better plans for you. And as long as you cling bitterly to failed plans, as long as you resist redirection, you will miss the better plans that are waiting. But the moment you let go, the moment you trust, the moment you say, "Not my plans, but yours," you discover something liberating. God's plans for you were always better than your own. And every failed plan was not a failure. It was a release from what was smaller, making space for what is greater. Seventh, Stoic lesson. God gives you the battles you need to become who you are meant to be. There is a question you ask when you face hardship. Why is this happening to me? Hidden inside that question is a devastating assumption that difficulties are punishments, that if God truly loved you, He would protect you from anything hard. But the Stoics understood something that assumption completely ignores. Difficulties are not punishments. They are training. They are not evidence that God has abandoned you. They are evidence that He is preparing you for something that requires exactly the strength only those difficulties can forge. Marcus Aurelius wrote something that should completely transform how you see your battles. Obstacles do not block the path. They are the path, because the path is not reaching an external destination. It is becoming who you need to be. And only obstacles create that transformation. Read that carefully. The obstacles are the path. They are not on the path, interrupting your progress. They are the path itself. Because real progress is not measured by external circumstances you achieve. It is measured by the internal character you develop. And character is not developed in comfort. It is forged in difficulty. Patience is forged in situations that test your patience. Strength is forged under loads that test your strength. Faith is forged in circumstances that test your faith. And if God protected you from everything that tests these qualities, you would never develop them. You would remain weak, impatient, with a shallow faith that collapses at the first real challenge. Epictetus, who faced hardships most people cannot imagine, taught something very specific about this. God does not give you random difficulties. He gives you the difficulties precisely designed to forge the qualities you will need for your purpose. And resisting those difficulties is resisting your preparation. That personalization of hardship is critical to understand. They are not generic. They are not random punishments. They are not evidence of bad luck. They are specific training for you, designed to develop exactly what you lack, to prepare you for exactly what is coming. And what is coming requires you to be stronger, wiser, more patient, more deeply grounded in faith than you are right now. So, God sends you the exact circumstances that will forge those qualities, not because He enjoys watching you suffer, but because He loves you enough to prepare you instead of leaving you weak and unready for what lies ahead. The practice that reveals what your current battles are teaching you is profound. Identify your greatest current difficulty, the battle you are fighting, and wish God would take away. Now ask yourself, What quality do I need to develop to navigate this wisely? Patience, strength, humility, deeper faith? And when you identify that quality, recognize something liberating. This battle is not an obstacle to your progress. It is the method by which God is developing exactly what you need. Nothing has gone wrong. Something is going exactly right according to a development plan you did not design, but that is perfectly suited for you. Seneca also observed how people misinterpret hardship. They see difficulty as an enemy when it is their trainer. They complain about the weight when the weight is exactly what builds the muscle they need. And in that constant complaining, they waste the training providence designed specifically for them. That is exactly what you are doing when you resist your battles. You are not being wise. You are wasting your training. You are complaining about the very weight that will make you stronger. You are resisting the exact process that will transform you into who you need to become. And in that resistance, you prolong the lesson. Because the lesson does not end when the circumstance changes. It ends when you change. Marcus Aurelius practiced seeing every difficulty specifically as divine training. When something difficult arrives, my first response is no longer, "Why me?" but "What for this? What is this teaching me? What must I develop? What is Providence preparing me for?" Those questions completely transform the experience of hardship. They turn suffering from meaningless torment into lessons with a specific purpose. They turn difficulty from evidence of divine abandonment into evidence of divine preparation. And from that perspective, you can move through it with purpose instead of resisting it with bitterness. Epictetus also taught his students to be grateful specifically for hardships. Give thanks for the battles not because they are pleasant, but because they are evidence that God considers you strong enough to handle them and valuable enough to invest in your development. Upside. That perspective is radically different from how you normally view difficulties. Normally, you see them as proof that God has forgotten you or does not love you. But the truth is exactly the opposite. They are proof that He loves you enough not to leave you weak. They are proof that He sees you as capable of growth, not condemned to remain as you are. They are proof that He has plans for you that require you to be stronger than you are now. Seneca also warned against praying for difficulties to be removed. Do not ask God to remove the weight. Ask Him to make you strong enough to carry it, because the weight is temporary, but the strength you build by carrying it is permanent. That is the prayer you must change. Stop praying, "God, take this difficulty away." Start praying, "God, give me the strength to move through this difficulty and be transformed by it." Because the first prayer seeks escape without transformation. The second seeks transformation through what you cannot escape. And only the second produces the real growth the difficulty was designed to create. Marcus Aurelius faced wars, plagues, betrayals, crisis after crisis, without asking for them to stop. He asked for wisdom to navigate them, strength to endure them, and character to emerge transformed rather than destroyed. And he wrote something specific about that approach. The Stoic prayer is not, "God, change my circumstances." It is, "God, change me." So these circumstances transform me instead of destroying me. That reorientation of prayer is essential. Because when you pray for circumstances to change, you assume the circumstances are the problem, but circumstances are neutral. The problem is your current inability to navigate them wisely. And God will not change circumstances to accommodate weakness. He will strengthen you through circumstances, so weakness becomes strength. Epictetus closed this lesson with a truth that should completely change how you see your battles. Every battle you face was permitted specifically for you, not as punishment, but as preparation. And the day you finally move through it, you will look back and recognize that this battle was exactly what you needed to become who you now are. That retrospective clarity is what you must learn to apply now. Instead of waiting until the end to recognize the battle was necessary, recognize it now. Recognize that this battle you are fighting is not evidence that something went wrong. It is evidence that something is going exactly right according to a development plan your limited mind did not design, but that is perfectly suited for what lies ahead. Seneca spoke the final truth about this. God gives you the battles you need, not the ones you want, because He sees who you need to become, and you only see what you want to avoid. Stop resisting your battles as if they were enemies. Start moving through them as training designed specifically for you, because God gives you the battles you need to become who you are meant to be. And resisting them is resisting your own growth into the person you were designed to become. Each Stoic lesson. Worrying is assuming that God has forgotten you exist. There is something deeply revealing about your constant worry. It is not just anxiety about the future, it is a theological statement. A statement that says, you believe you are alone in this, that God forgot you, that if you do not worry constantly and try to control everything, you will fall through the cracks. But that statement completely contradicts what you say you believe. You say you believe God is omniscient, yet you live as if you must constantly remind Him of your existence through worry. You say you believe God cares for you, yet you consume yourself with anxiety as if you were completely abandoned. You say you believe God is in control, yet you worry as if everything depended entirely on your constant vigilance. Seneca wrote something about worry that exposes this contradiction perfectly. To worry is to suffer twice, once in the mind by imagining disaster, and again if the disaster actually occurs. And most imagined disasters never occur, making all that anticipatory suffering completely unnecessary. But there is something even deeper in that observation. Worry is not just double suffering. It is operational distrust in God. Because when you constantly worry about the future, you are operating from the belief that God is not paying attention, that if you do not maintain anxious vigilance, things will fall apart because no one else is watching. That is the real belief driving your worry, not the one you declare, the one you live. Marcus Aurelius faced legitimate reasons for worry constantly. Wars that could be lost, plagues that could spread, betrayals that could collapse the empire. And he wrote something specific about how he handled that constant temptation to worry. When I feel worry arising, I stop and ask myself, am I worrying because I have forgotten that providence is at work? Or am I trusting that everything is unfolding exactly as it should? That question instantly reorients worry, because it reveals that worry is the result of temporarily forgetting that there is a greater order at work. It is not that circumstances are objectively unbearable. It is that you have momentarily forgotten to trust that those circumstances are under divine care. The practice that reveals how much you are assuming God has forgotten you is uncomfortable. List your 3 greatest current worries, the things that occupy your mind repeatedly. Now, for each one, complete this sentence honestly. I worry about this because I believe that if I don't worry. And when you complete that sentence, Recognize what you are really saying. I worry because I believe my worry is necessary, that if I do not maintain anxious vigilance, no one else will. That God needs my worry to remember to take care of me. That belief is exactly what fuels your worry. And it is the exact opposite of faith. Faith would say, I do not need to worry because I trust that God is taking care of this better than I ever could with all my worry. But instead, you say, I need to worry because if I don't, God might forget to handle this. Epictetus taught something radical about worry. Worry is arrogance disguised as responsibility, because it assumes that your anxious vigilance is more effective than divine care, that God needs your worry to function properly. That exposure of the arrogance hidden in worry is devastating, because you usually think of worry as humility, as a reasonable acknowledgement that things could go wrong. But in reality, it is arrogance. It is the belief that your human worry is more powerful than divine care. That, if you worry enough, you can prevent what God could not prevent without your help. And that belief is the complete opposite of trusting God. Seneca also observed how worry consumes the present entirely. The one who constantly worries about the future never lives in the present, and the present is the only moment where life actually happens. So he spends his entire life in an anxious imaginary future while completely losing the real life he is living. That is exactly your situation. You spend more time in anxious imagined futures than in the real present where God is actively at work. You spend more energy worrying about what might happen than trusting what is happening. And in that constant expenditure of energy on worry, you completely lose the peace that is available right now if you would simply trust. Marcus Aurelius practiced something specific when worry arose. When I worry, I stop and say out loud, God has not forgotten me. God is working on this right now. And my worry does not improve his work. It only ruins my peace. That verbal declaration interrupts the pattern of worry, because it explicitly names what worry assumes, that God forgot you and that your worry is necessary. And when you name it out loud, the absurdity of that belief becomes obvious. No, God has not forgotten you. No, your worry is not required for him to act. No, your anxiety does not improve outcomes. It only destroys your peace while you wait for results that will arrive with or without your anxious supervision. Epictetus closed this lesson with a practical instruction. Every time you worry, ask yourself, does this worry change anything except my peace of mind? And when you see that it changes nothing but your peace, let it go as the useless burden it is. Evend. That practical evaluation of the usefulness of worry is liberating, because it reveals that worry produces nothing of value. It only consumes your peace without improving anything. It does not prevent disasters. It does not create better outcomes. It does not protect what you love. It only steals the peace of the present while you wait for a future that will arrive exactly as it must, without your anxious oversight. Seneca summarized this with final clarity. When you consume yourself with worry, you are operating from the belief that you are alone, that God has abandoned you. When the truth is that you have never been more accompanied, never under more attentive care, never had less reason to worry. Stop worrying as if you were alone. Stop living as if God has forgotten your existence, and you must remind him through constant anxiety. Stop assuming that your worry is more powerful than his care, and begin to trust that he has not forgotten you, has not abandoned you, and does not need your worry to remember to take care of you. Because worrying is assuming that God has forgotten you exist. And that assumption is not only false, it is exactly what robs you of the peace he wants you to have, while you trust that everything is under his perfect care. 9th Stoic lesson. Do not ask God to remove the weight. Ask him to make you strong enough to carry it. There are two kinds of prayers you can make when you face something difficult. The first says, God, take this burden away. It's too heavy. I can't handle it. Remove it from my life. The second says, God, give me the strength to carry this burden. Transform me through it. Make me capable of what now feels impossible. The first seeks escape. The second seeks transformation. The first assumes the difficulty is the problem. The second recognizes that your current inability is the opportunity for growth. And the difference between these two prayers completely determines whether you emerge from hardship, broken or transformed. Marcus Aurelius carried burdens that would have crushed most people. Endless wars, devastating plagues, betrayals by those he trusted, constant political crises, the pressure of ruling an empire while everything seemed to fall apart. And he never prayed for those burdens to be removed. He wrote something specific about his approach. I do not pray for difficulties to cease. I pray for the wisdom to navigate them, the strength to endure them, and the character to emerge from them, a better version of who I was when I entered. Notice the complete reorientation of prayer. Not God, change the circumstances to accommodate my weakness, but God, change me so I can handle these circumstances and be transformed by them. That difference is not semantic, it is fundamental, because the first prayer assumes the circumstances are wrong and you need to be rescued from them. The second recognizes that the circumstances are exactly right to forge what you need to become, and that being rescued from them would mean losing the very transformation they were designed to create. Epictetus, who literally carried the weight of slavery, taught something radical about this. The weight you carry is not your enemy, it is your trainer. And asking God to remove it is asking him to stop your training just as you are developing the strength you will need. That perspective completely transforms how you experience burdens. They stop being meaningless torture that God should eliminate, and they become purposeful training that God is using to shape you. Not because he enjoys watching you suffer, but because he loves you enough to make you stronger instead of keeping you weak. The practice that reveals how you are praying is revealing. Think of your greatest current burden, the difficulty you wish God would remove. Now examine how you have been praying about it. Have you been praying, God, take this away, or God, strengthen me through this? And if you have been praying the first, recognize what you are really asking. God, stop my growth. Keep me in my comfort zone. Do not make me go through what would transform me, because I prefer to remain as I am. That is not a prayer of faith. It is a prayer of fear. Fear of transformation. Fear of the process. Fear of becoming who you need to be because it is uncomfortable. And as long as you pray from fear instead of faith, you will continue to resist the very process God designed for your highest good. Seneca observed how people weakened themselves by constantly asking for escape. They pray for easy lives, and God, in his wisdom, gives them difficult lives. Not because he hates them, but because he loves them. Because easy lives create weak people, and difficult lives navigated wisely create strong people. That is the tension you must understand. You ask for ease. God gives you difficulty, not because your prayer was ignored, but because it was answered with what you truly need instead of what you think you want. You need strength, and strength is developed only by carrying weights that initially feel too heavy. You need character, and character is forged only in circumstances that push that character to its limits. You need deep faith, and deep faith is developed only when circumstances force you to trust, when trusting feels impossible. Marcus Aurelius practiced constantly reorienting his prayers. Every time I catch myself praying for escape, I stop and reorient. No escape but transformation, no elimination but strength, no rescue but growth through what I cannot avoid. That constant reorientation of prayer is exactly what you need to practice, because your first reaction to difficulty will always be, God, take this away. But your second response, the response of deep faith, must be, God, use this to transform me. And between those two responses lies the entire difference between being destroyed by hardship and being forged by it. Epictetus also taught his students to give thanks specifically for the weight. Be grateful for the weight, not because it is pleasant to carry, but because it is evidence that God considers you strong enough to bear it, and trusts that carrying it will make you even stronger. That perspective is radically different from how you usually view your burdens. You usually see them as evidence of bad luck, as unfair punishment, as something you should not have to endure. But the truth is the opposite. They are evidence of divine trust. God considers you capable. He considers you strong enough. He considers you worthy of the training this weight provides. And asking Him to remove the weight is asking Him to stop that training, to lower His expectations of you, to keep you weak when you could be strong. Seneca summarized this with a perfect analogy. The athlete does not ask his trainer to remove the weights because he knows the weights are exactly what make him stronger. God is your trainer, and difficulties are the weights. Do not ask Him to remove them. Ask Him to make you capable of lifting them. That analogy exposes the absurdity of constantly praying for escape, because if an athlete constantly asked for lighter weights, he would never grow stronger. He would remain weak because he rejected the training that would have strengthened him. And you do the same when you constantly pray for easier circumstances. You reject the training God designed specifically to make you stronger and condemn yourself to remain weak because you chose comfort over growth. Marcus Aurelius also recognized that temporary weight creates permanent strength. The weight is temporary. The strength I develop by carrying it is permanent. So I prefer temporary weight that creates permanent strength over temporary comfort that guarantees permanent weakness. That preference for growth over comfort is the mindset you must cultivate, because if you always choose comfort, you will always remain weak. And weakness is a prison far worse than any temporary discomfort. But if you choose the weight that forges strength even when it hurts, you develop a capacity no one can take from you, a capacity to handle what comes next, to remain steady when others collapse, to trust when others despair. And that capacity is infinitely more valuable than any comfort you sacrifice to develop it. Epictetus closed with this final practical instruction. The next time you pray, do not ask God to remove the weight. Ask God to use the weight to transform you. Because the weight is temporary, but who you become by carrying it is eternal. That reorientation of prayer completely transforms your relationship with difficulty. Hardships stop being enemies God must eliminate. They become tools God is using to forge exactly who you need to become. And when you pray for transformation instead of escape, when you ask for strength instead of removal, you align yourself with what God is already doing. Instead of resisting the process, you cooperate with it. And in that cooperation, what could have destroyed you transforms you. Seneca spoke the final truth about this. Do not ask God to remove the weight, because if He removes it, you will never discover how strong you truly are. Ask Him to strengthen you, and you will discover that you are capable of far more than you ever believed possible. Do not ask God to remove the weight. Ask Him to make you strong enough to carry it. Because the weight is temporary, but the strength you develop by carrying it is exactly what you will need for everything that comes next. And if you constantly pray for escape, you will never develop the strength God is trying to forge within you. You will remain weak when you could be strong, vulnerable when you could be resilient, dependent when you could be capable, all because you chose temporary comfort over permanent transformation. 10th Stoic lesson. Trusting God means acting as if everything is already resolved, because it is. There is a fundamental difference between saying you trust God and actually trusting God, and that difference is revealed entirely by how you live. If you truly trust, you live with peace even when circumstances look chaotic, because you know that behind the apparent chaos there is divine order at work. If you truly trust, you act with certainty even when the future is uncertain, because you know the future is already in hands far better than yours. If you truly trust, you rest in the present even when tomorrow is unknown, because you know the unknown is already known by the one who governs everything. But if you say you trust while living in constant anxiety, your life reveals the truth. You do not really trust. You only wish you did. Epictetus taught something radical about true trust. The wise person lives as if he has already attained everything he needs, not because he has attained it materially, but because he trusts the providence so deeply that he knows what he needs will arrive when it needs to arrive. And that trust removes all anxiety about the future. That way of living, acting as if everything were already resolved, sounds irrational. Because the circumstances clearly are not resolved. The future is clearly uncertain. The outcomes are clearly not guaranteed. But that view only sees the surface. It looks at physical circumstances and concludes that nothing is settled. The Stoic perspective goes deeper. It sees that even though physical circumstances are still unfolding, the divine order behind them is already complete. What will happen is already decided. Where you are going is already determined. How everything will unfold is already resolved. And your anxiety changes none of that. It only steals your peace while you wait for what has already been decided to reveal itself. Marcus Aurelius practiced living from this deep trust. I live each day as if everything were already resolved, because I trust that everything is already resolved by providence. My only responsibility is not to resolve anything, but to respond wisely to what providence has already resolved. That distinction between resolving and responding is critical. You try to resolve. You try to control. You try to force specific outcomes because you believe that if you do not do it, nothing will be resolved. But the wise person only responds wisely to what is already being resolved, by something infinitely greater than himself. Not with passivity, but with active trust that his role is not to control outcomes, but to respond well within the process. The practice that reveals whether you truly trust is simple but devastating. Examine your current level of peace. Do you live in steady peace or in constant anxiety? And if the honest answer is anxiety, recognize what that reveals. You do not truly trust. Because real trust produces peace automatically, not as an effort, but as a natural result. When you deeply trust that everything is being handled by someone infinitely more capable than you, anxiety has nothing to cling to. But when you doubt, when you believe everything depends on your control, anxiety is inevitable, because you are carrying a burden that was never yours to carry, the responsibility of controlling the uncontrollable. Seneca observed this in people who claimed to have faith but lived in constant anxiety. They say they trust God with their words, but their actions reveal that they trust themselves. And because they know they are not capable of controlling what they try to control, they live in perpetual anxiety. That contradiction between words and actions is exactly your situation. You say, "I trust God" in church, but you live "everything depends on me" in daily practice. And that contradiction creates exactly the anxiety you feel. Because you are trying to carry a responsibility you claim to have surrendered, but in practice never truly released. Epictetus also taught that trusting God means completely releasing the outcome. When you truly trust, you no longer live in anxiety about the future, because you know that what must arrive will arrive, and what must depart will depart, and both will be perfect according to divine order. That complete release of the outcome is exactly what is missing from your so-called trust. Your trust is conditional. You trust when things go as expected. But when they do not, your trust collapses into anxiety. And that collapse reveals that it was never real trust. It was conditional hope that God would do what you wanted. Real trust is unconditional. It trusts when things go well and when they go badly, because it trusts the one who governs everything, not specific outcomes. Marcus Aurelius also practiced acting from the end. I act as if the perfect outcome were already guaranteed, not because I guarantee it through control, but because Providence guarantees it through its perfect plan. My task is simply to play my part, trusting that the whole is already complete. That way of acting from the end completely transforms your experience, because you no longer act from the anxiety of, "I must make this work." You act from the certainty of, "This is already working. I only need to play my part wisely." And that shift in perspective creates an entirely different quality of action and peace. Seneca summarized this with a perfect analogy. The actor does not control the play. He simply performs his role, trusting that the author has already written a complete work. God is the author. You are the actor. And the play is already written perfectly. Your job is not to rewrite it, but to perform your role trusting the author. That complete surrender of control over the play is exactly what it means to trust God. It does not mean you stop acting. It means you act knowing that your action is part of something larger that is already complete, already written, already directed by someone infinitely more capable than you, and that your anxiety about how it will turn out is entirely unnecessary because it is already unfolding exactly as it should. Epictetus closed with this final liberating truth. To trust God completely is to live as if you have already arrived where you are going, because in a sense, you already have. Providence has already completed the path. You only need to walk it with trust instead of anxiety. That sense of having already arrived, even while you are still physically on the path, is exactly the mindset of deep trust, because it recognizes that the ending is already secured by the one who controls everything. Your only responsibility is to walk the path with faith instead of fear, with trust instead of control, with peace instead of anxiety. Marcus Aurelius lived this until his final day. He faced death, betrayal, war, loss, and remained at peace. Not because the circumstances were peaceful, but because he trusted deeply that behind the chaotic circumstances there was perfect divine order. And he wrote something in his final days that perfectly captures this lesson. I live knowing that everything is already complete according to providence. My life, my death, everything to come, everything is already perfectly resolved. And in that knowledge, I find a peace that no circumstance can take away. That peace that no circumstance can take away is exactly what real trust produces. Not peace conditioned on things going well, but unconditional peace grounded in the certainty that the one who governs everything knows exactly what he is doing, and that your role is not to govern but to trust while you play your part. Seneca spoke the final truth on this. To trust God is not to believe he will do what you want. It is to know that what he does is exactly perfect, even when it completely contradicts what you wanted, and to live from that knowledge instead of from your limited preference. Stop living as if everything depends on your control. Start living as if everything is already resolved by the one who truly controls everything. Because when you truly trust, when you genuinely believe that God has everything under control, you act with peace in chaos, with certainty in uncertainty, with rest even while working. Not because circumstances changed, but because your relationship with the one who governs circumstances finally shifted from doubt disguised as faith to genuine trust. Trusting God means acting as if everything is already resolved, because it is, just at a deeper level than your physical eyes can see, at the level of divine order that governs all things. And when you finally live from that trust, when you finally release control and rest in the truth that everything is already in the best hands possible, you find the peace you were searching for in all the wrong places. The peace that only comes when you stop trying to be God and finally trust that he is God. The surrender that sets you free. You have reached the end of these 10 Stoic lessons on letting go of control and trusting God. And if you have been honest with yourself while listening, something fundamental has shifted in how you see your life. Not because you learned new information, but because you confronted truths you have been avoiding for years. That wanting to control everything means not believing that God has a better plan than yours. That your anxiety does not come from what happens, but from resisting God's will. That God does not need you to explain how to do his job. That letting go of control is the most difficult and the most powerful act of faith. That you do not control when blessings arrive, only whether you recognize them when they do. That your plans failed because God's plans for you are better. That God gives you the battles you need to become who you are meant to be. That worrying is assuming God forgot you exist, that you should not ask God to remove the weight, but to make you strong enough to carry it. That trusting God means acting as if everything were already resolved, because it is. Each of these lessons confronts your need for control directly. And each one reveals that this need is born from doubt, disguised as responsibility. Now you stand before a clear choice. You can return to the illusion of control, to the anxiety of trying to manage what you never could manage, to living as if God needed your constant supervision. That option is familiar. It is comfortable in its discomfort, because at least it lets you feel like you are doing something. But it carries a devastating cost. You will live the rest of your life in perpetual anxiety, trying to control the uncontrollable, and you will die exhausted from a battle you could never win. Or you can let go. You can trust. You can live like someone who truly believes that God has everything under control. That option is terrifying, because it requires complete surrender. It requires releasing the illusion that you are in charge. But it offers a reward control can never give. The peace of knowing you are in the best hands possible, that everything is being handled by someone infinitely more capable than you. Marcus Aurelius would remind you one last time: accept everything that happens as if you had chosen it yourself, not because you control what happens, but because you trust Providence so deeply that you accept its will as if it were your own. End quote. That deep acceptance, that complete surrender, is the path to peace. Not peace conditioned on things going well, but unconditional peace, grounded in the certainty that the one who directs everything knows exactly what he is doing. Seneca would remind you, the wise man does not try to control the wind. He adjusts his sails, knowing that the wind blows according to divine laws, and that fighting those laws is a waste of energy that could be used to navigate wisely. Stop fighting the wind of your circumstances. Stop trying to control what God is already controlling perfectly. Stop living in anxiety because you feel the need to supervise everything. And start trusting. Truly trusting. Deeply trusting. Not with words, but with how you live. With your peace in the middle of chaos. With your certainty in the middle of uncertainty. Epictetus would remind you, freedom does not come from controlling external circumstances. It comes from letting go of the need to control them. And when you let go, when you finally trust, you discover that you were always in the best hands possible. That freedom, that surrender that sets you free, is available now, not after circumstances improve, not when you finally understand everything, not when you receive guarantees. Now, in the middle of uncertainty, with circumstances exactly as they are, because trust does not wait for certainty, it trusts in the midst of uncertainty. And in that trust, it finds the peace that certainty could never give. The Stoics lived this. They did not preach it from comfort. They practiced it in the hardest circumstances. Marcus Aurelius trusted while his empire collapsed. Seneca trusted while facing forced death. Epictetus trusted while living in slavery. None of them had perfect circumstances. None of them had guarantees of good outcomes. None of them had control over what happened to them. But all of them had peace, because they trusted that behind what was happening, a perfect divine order was at work. That same peace is available to you. Not when circumstances change, but when your relationship with the one who controls circumstances changes. From doubt to trust. From control to surrender. From anxiety to peace. And that transformation does not require that you understand everything. It requires that you trust the one who does. So the final question is not whether these lessons made sense. The question is, will you let go and trust? Or will you keep carrying the impossible weight of trying to control what you never could control? That choice is entirely yours. No one can make it for you. Not even God will force you to trust. He can only wait patiently, lovingly, while you decide whether you will finally let go and rest in His hands, or whether you will keep trying to be God yourself, controlling the uncontrollable, living in constant anxiety because you assumed a responsibility that was never yours. Marcus Aurelius died in peace, not because everything went according to his plans, but because he trusted the one who planned everything. Seneca died in peace, not because he controlled his destiny, but because he trusted the one who did. Epictetus died in peace, not because he had external freedom, but because he found inner freedom by trusting completely. That same peace is calling you. It does not require changing your circumstances. It requires changing your relationship with the one who controls your circumstances. From supervising him to trusting him. From resisting his will to accepting it. From doubting his plan to resting in it. Seneca spoke the final truth about all of this. To control is to doubt God. To trust is finally to rest in the certainty that he knows exactly what he is doing. And that rest is the only real peace that exists. To control is to doubt God. You have been doubting for years, disguising it as responsibility, justifying it as necessary. But deep down, you know the truth. You have been trying to be God because you did not trust that He is God. And that doubt has kept you in constant anxiety, desperate control, and a peace that always seemed one outcome away. But today can be different. Today you can let go. You can trust. You can rest. Not later, now. Because everything is already in the best hands possible. And your job was never to control it. It was to trust it. Trust. Let go. Rest. Because God has this. He always has. And He always will. And in that knowledge, in that deep trust, you finally find the peace you were searching for in all the wrong places. The peace of knowing you were never in charge. And that is exactly the best thing that could have happened. Your voice matters here more than you think. Every insight you share strengthens and elevates this community, because this isn't just another space. It's a circle of people who choose to live with intention, with discipline, and with character. Each of you leaves a mark, and the reflection that receives the most support will be pinned as a banner of who we are. Not as decoration, but as a reminder of the kind of warrior who chooses to think, feel, and act with stoic clarity. Because this is a community that doesn't run from pain, it walks through it with courage. A community that doesn't look for cheap comfort, it seeks wisdom. A community that doesn't break under adversity, it turns it into strength. And if you've made it this far, it's because something inside you is already shifting. Something is waking up. Something is asking for more. So, before you leave, check the description. There you'll find the paths we created to help you keep strengthening your mind. They're not there by accident. Each one exists to help you go deeper, build inner resilience, and return again and again to that place within you where nothing and no one can take your peace. Subscribing isn't doing the podcast a favor. It's an act of respect toward yourself. It's choosing not to live on autopilot anymore. It's committing to think differently, to feel with more order, to live with more intention. Because every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we publish reflections designed to stay with you when life gets heavy, when your mind gets loud, when you need a reminder of who you are. Not following us means risking missing the one lesson you might need in the hardest moment. And if you choose to go a step further, If you choose to become a member, understand one thing clearly. You're not donating, you're sustaining a mission. Because of you, this flame stays alive. Because of you, we can keep spreading Stoicism as a refuge for millions who are fighting not to give up. Your support is what keeps this podcast alive, strong, and growing. You're not a spectator, you're part of the foundation holding this community together. I'll see you in our next Stoicism for Winners session, where we'll keep exploring the depth of Stoic wisdom applied to everyday life. In the meantime, dive into the recommended sessions in the description and continue your path. And until we cross paths again, don't forget this. You are the master of your perception, the guardian of your peace, and the warrior of your own battle. That is the legacy of Stoicism. That is the art of becoming invincible.